Welcome back. Today we'll be talking about Chapter 3, The Social Self, which is all about you. The American psychologist William James coined the term the social me to talk about those parts of our self-image, our self-esteem, our self-knowledge that are derived from our interactions with other people, that is, from our social relationships. A similar idea comes from the American sociologist and economist Charles Cooley, who coined the term looking glass self. Cooley's idea is that we base much of our self-image on how other people react to us. That is, other people's reactions, their approvals, their disapprovals, serve as a mirror to our own selves. While we may think of ourselves as fixed entities that don't change across time, it's certainly the case that the aspects of ourselves that we are aware of and that we show other people change depending upon the situation. That part of ourself that we are currently aware of is called the working self concept. We can think of people's overall view of themselves as varying along a continuum from independent to interdependent. People who have a more independent view of themselves see themselves and their behavior as distinct, autonomous, and not dependent upon others. People who have a more interdependent view of themselves tend to see themselves as part of a group. Their behavior, their goals, their aspirations are defined by and contained by the values of the group. While every individual varies somewhere along this continuum, in general, there tend to be more independent self-views in North American and Western European cultures, and more interdependent views of the self in many other cultures around the world. Similarly, there are gender differences both in beliefs about the self and beliefs about other people's view of themselves. Men, on average, have more independent views of themselves than women do. Again, this is an average, and there is a great deal of overlap and difference among individuals. Sometimes we don't have accurate, objective measures of our own abilities, thoughts, opinions, feelings. In these cases, it is helpful to look to Leon Festinger's social comparison theory. The idea is that when we don't have an external objective criterion, we look to compare ourselves to other people to see where we rate in terms of our own abilities or ideas. The American social psychologist Susan Fiske describes this in her book, Envy Up, Scorn Down. When we make comparisons about people that we see as less than us, this boosts our self-esteem by making us feel above them. However, we protect our self-esteem when making upward comparisons by using those comparisons to motivate ourselves to get to the place of the people that we envy. Again, this is a generality and doesn't apply in every single case. Self-esteem is that overall level of evaluation that we have of ourselves. It can be very positive, very negative, or somewhere in between. The trait self-esteem is our average level of self-regard across time, whereas state self-esteem refers to the way that we feel about ourselves in a particular situation and instance. One way to look at this is the sociometer hypothesis, which holds that the way we feel about ourselves, our self-esteem, depends on whether we feel we're being accepted or rejected by others. When we feel accepted by other people, our self-esteem is higher than when we feel rejected by other people. In order to protect our sense of self-esteem, Most of us are subject to the better than average effect. The idea that most of us, on average, think that we're better than the average person on any kind of socially accepted positive personality trait or ability. An interesting demonstration of this involved two studies by Preston and Harris in 1965 and Svensson in 1981, who found that the majority of drivers interviewed while hospitalized for an auto accident rated their driving skill as closer to expert than poor. Again, these were people who were in the hospital as a result of having been in an auto accident. You might think that having an unrealistic view of your own abilities and personality is a bad thing. But in fact, at least in Western countries, most research has found that people who have a slightly elevated view of themselves, higher than average self-esteem, tend to be less likely to be anxious or depressed. In fact, depressed people tend to be most accurate in terms of rating their own abilities. Most of us have a way that we present ourselves that's slightly different in different situations. For example, you probably behave differently in class than you do at a party. The term for this is impression management, trying to control how other people will view us. When you go for a job interview, it's unlikely that you'll walk in, put your feet on the other person's desk, and tell them, "Hey, I'm here to take your job." The impression that we present to other people is controlled to some extent, and if we don't do that, we run into some serious social problems. This impression is what the American sociologist Irving Goffman referred to as face, the image of ourselves that we want other people to see. Another way that we can sometimes maintain our self-esteem is through what's called self-handicapping. This is the tendency to engage in self-defeating behavior so that we'll have an excuse ready if we don't perform or behave correctly. For example, you might fail to study for a test because you're concerned that you really aren't going to do well. That way, if you don't do well on the test, you can just say to yourself, well, I could have done better if I'd studied, and you don't have to think of yourself as someone who simply can't learn